Hello and welcome to this edition of the Championship Talk podcast. I'm your host Paul O'Toole, and not joining me again is my co-host Thomas Falco. We do have a conflict scheduled this week, but we wanted to make sure that we get out at least something around the fixtures at the weekend because there's some great games, and there's been some important news as well. So let me go into probably the only real news talking point this week is Markus Schopp. The Barnsley manager or Barnsley head coach has been sacked after one win in 15 games. Barnsley have sacked head coach Markus Schopp after one win in 15 games, 7 straight defeats, left them 23rd in the Championship. It was appointed in June on a 3-year contract, but they really haven't got going under his leadership. When you look at the success the previous managers have had, obviously Valérien Ismaël left for West Brom, but amazing season last season. He took over from Gerhard Stuber, who again had an amazing season, first season in the Championship. So Barnsley alongside Cardiff are after a manager, and some would say have your standards and work towards them. Obviously Barnsley last season, the season they had was amazing. They would want to have built on that. They would probably, their board and their fans probably see them as an upper mid side trying to get into the playoffs again. This league is competitive, as any fan will know, and when you look at the change in management, what I think Barnsley, there's probably going to be another unrecognised name coming, as the last 3 managers have been. They've definitely got a style of play. They've definitely got a business model they're working towards, and they've definitely got goals that they want to meet. And if you don't meet those goals, you are going to be, you're going to pay those consequences. Personally, I don't have if your manager's aware of that going in. So if you set the scene of, right, okay, this is the expectations, these are the tools and resources you've got to work with, and everything is up front, and then the manager accepts and says, yes, I believe I can make that team successful, then a parting of the ways like this isn't as harsh as it may look. When you look at McCarthy, Cardiff, horrendous run of results. Cardiff are a team that want to be pushing for promotion. To sit 21st, not very acceptable. Barnsley sit 23rd, 1 win from 15 games, not very acceptable. So I think I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that when it comes through managers taking appointments, then getting players sold, or a business model that changes, then I think that's a more bitter pill to swallow. And, we don't want to see anyone losing their job, but in any job that you do, and thinking your personal lives, your personal, jobs that you do, there are performance expectations, and obviously there are consequences to not meeting those performance expectations. So I do think it's harsh, but I think Barnsley are clear on what they want. It would be interesting to see if they've got a successor lined up, because I also sometimes have an issue with clubs having a successor walking in the door sort of half hour, 45 minutes after sacking a manager. I think that's wrong. But I do also think it's wrong when they sack a manager and then wait 3 or 4 weeks and they didn't clearly have a clue who was going to take over. So it'll be interesting to see how Barnsley go with that. Next thing I want to talk about, and this is something really simple, and it's Sky announcing the midweek matches that are live, and they're going to show every single midweek match, every game from Tuesday the 2nd of November, Wednesday the 3rd of November, Tuesday 23rd of November, Wednesday 24th of November. All of the games midweek are going to be live on Sky, which I think is really, really good. Customers can obviously view this behind the red button. However, what they also have opened it for is Sky Sports football customers will also be able to see the matches, to see each match streamed live on the app, which I think is a development from last season. They sign in with Sky ID, and then you'll be able to see all the games on your app. Again, Sky Q customers, it affects it as well. I think that's a good thing, because I think the more that the Championship football is accessible. Me and Thomas had a really good conversation a couple of weeks ago, and it's frustrating we didn't have a microphone turned on. Around, if you think back to when football was, when football was not behind a paywall, so it wasn't as locked in behind Sky. as younger people, we watched Champions League football. We watched all the FA Cup games. We watched. It was almost you wanted your team to do well because you wanted them to be on TV in 3-4 weeks' time. Because to watch a football game, you go back 20, 30 years, it wasn't as easily streamed if you have that paid service. What you tend to find now is kids, if the family has got Sky or BT Sports, then that football is accessible to those children, and a lot of it is accessible. But for kids that have got families that aren't interested in football and don't pay the quite considerable sums that you need to have Sky, BT, Amazon Prime, all the TV the streaming service that there are, children that aren't exposed to be able to watch football aren't going to necessarily get that same passion that myself and Thomas got when we were kids. And I think that an interesting topic of conversation is you put football behind a paywall, and it's only the people that are passionate about it now that can afford it. And as we move into economic struggles, then obviously the people that can't afford it don't, that you scale back, and you actually end up with a non-organic growth of fan base. It's actually now, there's going to become a period of time in the future where it'll actually be cheaper to go to a game than it will be to watch it on Sky. That will happen. It may take 10, 20 years to do it, but that's going to be an interesting development when that does happen. You look in places like Germany where they've got caps on ticket sales, etc. Just look at your local club. Just look at the local club. For myself and Thomas, we've attended Ipswich Town games. It's £15 for an adult to go in. It's £4 for a kid. When you actually look at that, 2 games of that, 2 home games a month, that's not an exorbitant amount of money. When you actually look at your Sky subscriptions and add up your Amazon subscriptions, BT subscriptions, and Sky subscriptions, you're probably coming to a similar ballpark amount. And I think that's an interesting thing as football develops on. We always talk about the finances of football, but the Championship is the little cousin to the Premier League, and the kind of gets the scraps of the Premier League. But when you look at the football that's on show in the Championship, especially this weekend, it's phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal. There's some brilliant games, and we will be covering those on the main pod. But absolutely fantastic games, and I think it was just worth talking. Me and Thomas are going to have another discussion around that, because I think it is something that we really want to. We really kind of want to discuss, because we both got into football in a different way, as did all of our listeners. And if you didn't have that exposure to football when you were young, then that passion doesn't bite you. And I know NFL have experienced a very similar thing in America. If you're not into American football, if you're not, your household, your mum, your dad are not into American football, and you haven't got the paid subscription services, you're not being exposed to watching it. And then if you're not exposed to watching it, you're not going to become a new fan. And what will happen is the fan base generationally gets older and older and older. And you don't end up being able to watch. And this comes into when we talk about things like the European Super League, where you've got the Real Madrid president saying that younger people can't watch a 90-minute game of football. Yeah, most of them can't, because they're not working and can't pay for the subscription service to be able to do it. And I think that's like when you look at the way football is exposed to ourselves, to children, to young adults, as a medium. Anyone can go on YouTube and watch the 3-4 minute highlights probably an hour after a game's finished. And I think that's becoming more and more. That's free to digest. You watch your minute advert from Google, and then you watch your highlights, and it's done. Yeah, you've not watched the game. You've not subscribed to Sky services, etc. So I do think it's good that Sky is showing more games. I just think it's going to be interesting to see how you balance wanting more money to football accessible to everyone. And I think that is interesting. And I do wonder, and this was a question I was going to pose to Thomas, is how long before we think we would see a World Cup or a European Championships solely behind a paywall? And I think that's going to be really interesting. And I think that's going to be how football develops. And it's an interesting conversation point, because if you think BT show the Champions League final on their YouTube channel, if they get 9 million views on that YouTube streaming channel, and then they can then cut the highlights, etc., they would probably earn more money from ad revenue than having it on a terrestrial channel with paid adverts. So it's going to be interesting to see how football develops into that new modern world of more content is consumed on YouTube than is consumed via terrestrial means. More content is consumed on recording on skyboxes, TiVo boxes, whatever you want to call it, than live. And look at your own viewing habits. When was the last time you watched probably the only thing most of football fans watch live is a football game, and if that's put behind more and more paywalls, you're not going to watch it live. You're going to watch the highlights, and I think that's really interesting. And again, it also comes down to time. Myself and Thomas, I know that even though he's not done the podcast for a couple of weeks, we'll still watch a game on Tuesday, game on Wednesday, probably a replay, all of the highlights, because that's how we do it. We'll watch the game on Friday, game on Saturday, game on Sunday, all of the highlights. That's a lot of football. It's a lot of football to watch and consume, but we enjoy it. If it wasn't accessible to us, it would just be the highlights, the Quest highlights, or the YouTube channel, the YouTube 2-3 minutes sort of sub highlights that Sky put out for every game. So that interesting discussion points. So I'm interested to hear what you guys say in the comments down below. Thank you all for watching, and again, we do aim to get both myself and Thomas back next week, and it will be a bumper episode because obviously we'll have 2 rounds of fixtures. It'll also be a bumper episode because there'll be a lot of news for us to discuss, obviously the managerial sackings, etc. To go through. As always, check out our main pod where we'll have all of the games from the weekend, and there are some crackers, absolutely fantastic games, and well previewing the midweek games and the weekend's fixtures that are going to come up. Okay, thank you all for listening, and I'll speak to you all next week. Goodbye.